thrilled to have with us today another example of the amazing local Philly talent we have in the area. This is Dr. Mike DiRiccio. Yeah, Mike? Dorico. And imagine every milestone you can hit in a varied musical career. So PhD from UCLA, music historian, hip hop producer, running the label over at Albright College, amazing drummer. Check out some of his videos on drumming, amazing producer. So it's all coming together today, and you have your chance to talk live to this really multi-talented gentleman. We're really happy to have you here, Mike. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invite. So just a brief introduction. So I'm Mike DiRiccio. I teach over at Albright College. I'm the director of music technology over there. So I teach mostly in music technology, but also in game design. So I teach courses in game design and game audio. Kind of reflects my own path through music, which started as like a sort of traditional drummer, and then got into electronic music, kind of first in terms of composition, but then started doing work in hip hop production, as well as sound design mostly for video games and then VR. The latest things I've been doing in the past few years have been virtual reality related, which is kind of where this talk is coming from.
Nice.
So let me just share this. Well,
and as you're setting up and sharing your screen, I mean, I think, Jen, doesn't you think that's a really interesting piece for our students right there, that like a music career, music tech right now is so varied in terms of the things that you do.
And just merging them together and not thinking of them separate, right? Like that they're complementary. That's how I try to look at it. But it's also, I'm really curious how you got to this point, because virtual reality is something I think, I don't know, it's new for some people. Some people, they're really heavily involved. Let me see, we have yes, Isaiah.
Yeah, that was mostly the sort of kind of cross-disciplinary thing came when I moved out to LA for a while, and I was studying the Los Angeles beat scene.
Mm-hmm.
So artists like Flying Lotus and Daedalus. This is a very experimental community of hip hop producers that were also very interested in video games, and also like just mixed media stuff. A lot of them have made music for games themselves, very heavily influenced by that. So it was really like out of that community I became interested in kind of crossing over into other media. Of course, not to say that millions of people around the world aren't doing that at this moment, of course, but that was one unique kind of scene that was really crossing boundaries.
Before you start, I'm sorry, I'm just out of curiosity, what do you think is the biggest misconception about virtual reality with music?
Well, part of that's what I'll talk about as we frame it, but definitely just off the bat, I think the idea, this is my same misconception, which I've talked to you two about with music software in general, is skeuomorphic design, which is designing experiences to sort of look and feel like the real physical thing, and kind of ignoring the specific affordances that you could get with new media, right? So that's kind of, to me, the big issue with software design more generally. And of course, software companies are taking note of that. Pro Tools finally, after how many years, are now flattening their design, right? With
dark mode.
11, right? So they're kind of coming into the 21st century. Obviously, Ableton has been paving the way for that. But virtual reality, of course, is a space in which you really don't have to. You can really have a lot of interesting immersive experiences without connecting it back to the real world. And that idea,
so that'll be really interesting to watch for in Mike's talk, right? So now the barriers are down, and are you just going to spend all of your CPU cycles trying to recreate the reality that you live in already? Or can you use them to create something you've only imagined?
Right. And a lot of it's like what you said, a lot of the differences here have to do with the scale of the company. So a lot more DIY designers and producers are doing a lot more abstract things because of the lack of the need for more complicated assets, graphic design assets and audio assets, etc.
Great.
Yeah, so today I'm kind of going to give just to give a brief overview. I'm going to talk about like a general survey, a brief survey of kind of some of the apps that I think are doing some interesting things, but also pointing out some of the shortcomings of them, and just try to think through like what is the future of music making in the context of VR, which is of course something people have thought a lot about lately. And then towards the end, I'm going to make sure I have time to do a demo of a DJing app in virtual reality, and talk through some of those issues by actually looking at a piece of software. So the idea of XR, I think that's a, music production XR. What do I mean by XR? Are people familiar with this? I imagine if you're in classes with these two, I'm sure you've talked about some of this stuff, but what is XR? And maybe this is
let's see if we can get some guesses in the chat. Oh, never mind. I gave it away. I was typing ahead of you in the chat.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe I'll stay away from the questions, knowing that I'm not going to actually get any audio feedback. So XR, right? Mixed reality. And so when we're talking about XR, we're really talking about not only virtual reality, but also augmented reality. And I even think of just sort of using technology in analog spaces, like using technology in a live performance stage as a sort of like mixed reality kind of performance. So just in this screenshot, you see just some of these examples. That's in the top. I believe this will be your top left, right? Is a music production app in virtual reality called Exa, and it's sort of like meant to be just kind of like a music making software. It's not sort of fully functional as a production software, but the main idea behind this is that you have these sort of like colorful blocks and like very fancy like lights in the background to kind of give you this almost like Zen-like space to just make music. Whereas the one below that is that's an augmented reality app called Beat Machine AR. So augmented reality, of course, will apply an overlay to the real world. And so here we're looking at like a physical desk, and then you're seeing these virtual overlays in real space that allow you to sequence like you would with a drum machine. And then that image to the right, that's Laura Escude, or her former artist name was Alux. She's kind of got big as she was the first Ableton certified trainer. She was also the controllerist for Kanye West, which I believe is what this shot is probably from. I'm not exactly sure about that. But she kind of really put on the map this idea of controllerism, using physical hardware to control digital software in a live performance context. Kind of, I see this as like the next step of turntablism, right? How do you perform live with digital technology?
And there's a plethora of those, right? I mean, the controller field has just gone wild, right? You've got like Bluetooth rings that people are wearing, and the motion of the rings control things. We've had these multifaceted gloves for quite a while. And so just about we had Vijay Manzo here last time, and he was saying, the interesting part is less, for him, it's less the physical nature of the device, but the mapping. Like, what does it map to? What does it actually control at the end of the day?
Yeah, for sure. I think of the extreme examples, like something like that's been around for a while, but Face OSC, which mapped like every node of your face to max MSP. Or like there's like these new ones like the brain mapping.
Yes.
Muse, right? Yeah. Right.
So some of it's very practical from a performer's perspective. Then some of them you're kind of like, what is the practical use of these? And I guess that's always the balance of experimentation versus practicality in music tech.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the main question that I'm really interested in, and this is really coming out of not just studying music technology, but just during the pandemic, right? What is the future of music making virtually, especially kind of post-COVID? Obviously, despite the kind of horrible tragedy that we're still continuing to witness with the pandemic, the quarantine has really kind of sparked a renaissance in thinking about the virtual arts. Especially I'm thinking the huge investment that both developers and consumers have placed in gaming. And I'm remembering, for example, throughout the quarantine, throughout this past summer, is the inability to get like a Nintendo Switch, or the inability to buy a Oculus Quest, and the way in which there became this very real need for people to kind of escape into these experiences in a very real way.
Mike, if you can just like clue us in, like, what was the experience like for your music program, for your music tech SRT program?
Right. Yeah. So what happened with us is this was so of course spring was sort of a wash, I think, for a lot of people. Halfway through the semester, right, we kind of switched. So it was mostly just about staying alive, I think, in a lot of ways. But really fall was like the hit the ground running, like what are you going to do about it? And that was also the semester that I became chair of the music department. So I kind of took it on myself as like what I wanted to do for the department. I really encouraged everyone to kind of really think about how you could transform your concert experience into a more virtual kind of thing. So one thing we started to do was like, I was really into 360 audio. So like the choir released some 360 videos of their rehearsals and performances. So like they're having like 360 audio where you could kind of turn your head and not only see people using a VR headset, but also hear them in a 3D space. That wasn't possible with every ensemble, but I think the choir, that worked pretty well. And then also like, how do you put on a concert when a lot of students aren't on campus? And that was more just about teaching music folks to be AV editors and
yeah, wearing multiple hats.
A lot of tutorials on Adobe Premiere. And to the point where now it's where we have like an assistant, we were able to hire an assistant just to do this type of thing. So already kind of an example of how this is changing music departments is that now like we really have to know about video, at least on a basic level.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, the virtual choir stuff was happening obviously, but that was like a little bit like, it was a little too much work for what we didn't perceive to be like necessarily a huge reward. They were just happening all over the place, you know. And, so that was another kind of example.
Nice.
I think this is kind of the point here, is that the pandemic kind of did force musicians and composers to kind of think outside of the box about how they would create and perform music. And we've already mentioned a few of these examples. I spoke with a group of classical musicians early on, like in late March, and they were like, what do we do now? How do we present our music now? And a lot of that was about like classical music 360 concerts. So maybe you've seen these videos where like the 360 camera is placed in the middle of the orchestra and you can kind of see as if you're sitting inside of the orchestra. VR concerts, so the whole like a VR ticketing system in Oculus. Like Oculus venues, you can watch VR concerts there. I think one of the ones that really put this type of stuff on the map was Travis Scott's Fortnight concert. So Travis Scott did a concert inside of the video game Fortnite, and it was like something like the most well-attended concert ever in the history of music. Like gross, like so it totally like was this. It became this signal for the music industry to say, okay, if we want to actually make money off of this stuff now, we have to actually think it toward the game industry, or at least outside of how we've been doing things, right?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of makes me think the group Two Set Violin, right? So they did, those two guys did a concert and they literally looked and they realized they were playing for 14,000 people online at the same time synchronously. And they were like, you know, how many houses would we have to sell out to get to play to 14,000 people?
No, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent
point. Yeah, that's, and that's, I think, you know, the music industry realized this with the like post Napster, is that the music industry was very much at the beck and call of the tech industry, whether they like it or not. And we still are. The music industry still relies on the tech industry for monetization and all that. But now I think they're thinking even outside of that, and that's where we'll see how far the games thing goes. But I think just this idea of having featured events within video games, like, you know, you had Biden and Harris did some campaigning in Animal Crossing.
I remember that, yes.
Right? So, and Travis Scott doing the performance inside of Fortnite. Like, I just think these are really interesting ways to think about the future of performance.
I don't know. I go to games to escape. So if you start campaigning to me in the games, I think I'm going to have to start a game in the game to go into the games.
Yeah, that brings up ethical questions too. You're right. Like, but no, it's interesting.
I'd say the final example of, you know, what Twitch has done too. Twitch has done some really good things in terms of live streaming. Like, so Twitch DJ and producer live streams.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, has Claire been a guest on? Yeah.
She will be.
She will be. So yeah, so like what Claire does with Twitch, live streaming production lessons, live streaming DJ sets, all that stuff. I think that's another way forward. But we're also seeing the pushback from the platforms. So Twitch recently initiating their like limits on music streaming. So all of a sudden, a lot of people couldn't do DJ sets on Twitch because of these limitations. So it's sort of
one of the funny ones, right, was Metallica got taken down. They were playing their own song.
Full circle, Napster.
Yeah, right. So I think that's kind of like you know, the music industry kind of taking its page from the tech industry. Now I think the music industry is increasingly becoming more kind of ludic or game-like in its approach. And that's kind of a secondary question of the presentation, is kind of thinking about how video games have influenced the practice of music production in the 21st century. I think that the term, so this is always a quote that I think about Laurie Anderson, the experimental composer. Laurie Anderson said that virtual reality will never look real until they learn how to put some dirt in it. And I think that's really, it gets at the crux of the issue with the term virtual reality is a dichotomy, right? It's sort of this seemingly irresolvable dichotomy where you're trying to balance the affordances of the virtual space. And this is supposed to be things that we could never do in the real world, right? Or seemingly never do in the real world, with the concrete balance of concrete reality. So virtual reality seems like it's this kind of irresolvable tension. And I think for music makers, people who develop music apps for virtual reality, they've really, their attempt to deal with this, to try to put some dirt into the virtual reality space, is to simply try to recreate music hardware in virtual spaces, right? And like I mentioned before the talk, this is what software developers have been doing for a really long time. So despite any similarities in the visual appearance, and even the sonic fidelity that you might get out of a virtual reality music making app, the apps still don't always look real because they don't feel real. And so that's, to talk about the interface, that's, I think, where developers are thinking now. It's like, what is the actual interface for connecting to the virtual space? Is it simply, you know, two controllers that you wave in your hand, or now they're doing hand tracking with virtual reality, where you can actually just use your hand to control.
Right, gesture-based stuff, right?
Or do you need some actual like physical, like, is there something about the physical touch of an actual hardware interface, right? So I think this is a great quote to kind of think about these things. How do you transpose the embodied feel of real life music making into any seemingly immaterial space of virtual reality, right? Or
so how does that hit you as a drummer? I mean, I can hardly think of an instrument more with more physical feedback than a drummer experiences. Does it sound to you like there's not going to be a way to bridge that gap? Or
I think that, I mean, to me, I kind of made the switch to electronic drums pretty early on, just because of the necessity of like being in an apartment and not being able to have noisy instruments around. And I thought like that transition was actually more fluid maybe than maybe a lot of drummers would think, especially, you know, hand percussion folks or Latin percussion folks who are used
Absolutely.
to like you know, like drums with like calf skin heads, you know.
Yeah,
To recreate, that's what, again, going back to that Laurie Anderson quote, it's hard to recreate that. I think some advances would be sensory percussion. This is I don't know, maybe Jen, you've come across this. Sensory percussion is like it's a sensor-based system that you put on real drums.
Yes.
But it has like millions of like variations of sounds you can get to really kind of try to emulate the feel of how nuanced an actual drum head is. So it's just like a lot of like sensors and trigger locations that you can really get kind of a pretty varied sound out of a kit.
And I think that not just drummers, but just musicians in general, shifting to that mindset of like something that's, I don't know, acoustic to digital.
Yeah, right.
Like hard to like for some, it's very hard to translate that. And, you know, maybe this could be like a bridge with that. I don't know. But yeah.
A lot of it has to do, it's like resonance. Resonance is a physical thing that you're never going to get with digital tool, or it's going to be different. It's always going to be coming out of a speaker. So that's why I think a lot of digital musicians love sub bass so much.
Yes, yes.
It's a translation of like some organic feel of resonance that you get out of most instruments, or it's the closest that you get to like grounding yourself in an embodied practice in some way, maybe. That's a great question. So I'm just going to go over a few examples. I'm going to play short videos of a few examples of what I see as like some of the more popular VR specific softwares. And again, most of these follow that same type of skeuomorphic design of like trying to just translate real life into into the virtual spaces. This is Korg Gadget VR, which was just announced at NAMM, so it's really in its infancy. It's not released yet, but you can see that the whole idea behind this software before they even released the VR app is about the idea of working with plugins and hardware as actual gadgets, like as actual things that you can tinker with. So they're playing on music producers' love for just turning knobs and pressing buttons. And that's how they design the software, is that you have these gadgets that are designed after classic beat machines and plugins and things like that, even like an arcade set. And then the VR version of this, as you'll see, is simply allowing you to just tool around with that in a virtual space. And that's the Oculus Quest, so the wireless VR headset. You can hear that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a fitting motto, that new music always.
Yeah, leave it to Korg.
Very modern.
Well, I'll tell you what hits me, Mike, like, right, I've seen a lot of electronic performers discuss how a challenge for them is live performance, right? Like, how do you make this feel like something that it's worth coming to watch and look at? And you throw an Oculus on everybody in the audience and let them sink into this, and I think they'll have an experience. I'm too much at it work.
Yeah, I mean, you could see like totally that video was entirely about the dirt of it, right? Like
Yes.
just designing actual hands to touch the screen.
Yeah, right.
And also just like the really big visual displays. It does everything that music software has tried to do in terms of like the skeuomorphic design approach, but really amplified it, right?
Sure.
Now, is one of the plays price point? So, I mean, is the idea that like we can give you this cheaper than if you actually bought physical hardware? I mean, clearly, right? If you got 15
Right, yeah.
monitors that look like they're 50 inches a piece, that's a
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Like, how accessible is this going to be?
Yeah, I would say that is one of the things that the VR products have done, I think, better than regular music software using mouse and trackpad, is accessibility features. A lot of the reviews, if you read like the Oculus store reviews, a lot of the reviews you'll come across are from people with disabilities who will say, this is great. Like, I've always wanted to, I don't know, rock climb, or I've always wanted to, make music, but I can't afford this or that. It is actually, I would say, it's tough to argue this because it is like the whole marketing rhetoric around VR is about accessibility. But I do think that it has, a lot of the software made for it has actually done great things as far as accessibility concerns, to allow more people into the.
Not to mention the therapeutic benefits of it too.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And of course, VR has been used to treat like soldiers with PTSD.
Exactly.
All these types of things for many years.
And of course, the flip side to that is at EDUCAUSE, the labs, there were a couple of schools presenting who had full VR labs, and they had barf bags at every station.
Oh yeah.
I was about to mention that. Because I'm just gonna be honest with you, my VR experience has been with, I have the Google Pixel and it came with the VR headset, and I was underwater in this really cool space, but after like 5 minutes I got really nauseous.
Yeah,
So that's, I mean, that's my personal thing, and I'm sure that's other people as well.
absolutely. Yeah, and they're certainly aware of that, and I think they do their diligence to warn you and to say, remember, take a break after 10 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you can acclimate yourself to it, but like, yeah, that's.
And I think a big part also would be acclimating, but that's also, that's certainly a question of accessibility. Right?
Absolutely.
I'd say the Quest does it better than previous models because it's a little less heavy. So that's part of it, is like how it doesn't weigh down your center of gravity.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I'll just go through a couple others. So this one, of course, is simply trying to emulate a Eurorack modular synthesis setup and to talk about accessibility, modular.
Right. Oh, that's
oh my goodness.
A lot of people's lives.
So this would be an example of, again, just kind of taking the space of patching in a modular synth setup and just applying it to a virtual space. And you can kind of see how that works.
Yeah, that's wild.
So again, you're getting a lot of that, the marketing rhetoric of accessibility and new, right, innovation and newness.
And I think,
of course, that modern.
And I think also new ways of understanding how it works in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And notice one thing with this video, which I don't think you would typically see, at least at most modular synth shows that I've been to, is you don't see people tend to like moving.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
They tried to, again, add some of that dirt to the experience. Like, yeah, you're actually going to move your body if you play it.
So now, Mike, what's the distribution look like? I mean, is this kind of turning into console wars where like some of these apps will be available for some, maybe for Oculus, but not for a Google, or is it collapsing along those kind of lines?
Yeah, it's kind of the big one now because it's wireless and it's pretty powerful is the Quest. But the Oculus Quest, Oculus in general, of course, is owned by Facebook. So it's extremely proprietary. Their store is you can only buy it through their store. You can link up an Oculus Quest to a pretty high-powered PC to use applications in other distributors like Steam. But generally, Steam would be Steam VR store would be the other main distributor for other headsets. So the Quest is a bit different because it's wireless, so you don't get the connection to the PC that allows for certain other types of distribution.
Standalone.
Yeah. But Facebook definitely has its clutches in terms of how you use it and how you pay for things and all that.
Interesting.
Data. Go make some more data.
Yes.
Personal choices.
This would be the last one I'll show. The last example I'll show is just something that's a bit more close to what we would think of as controllerism. Which is Modulia Studio, which does require, I think at this point, a connection to the PC. But what this is this allows you to control your digital audio workstation using a VR kind of interface. And that's what she's doing in this video, is she's actually like recreating a Pink Floyd tune with this sort of DAW controller, basically.
Parce qu'au début, je pensais que j'allais pas y arriver. Et en fait, je me suis entraînée, j'ai fait attends, je crois que j'y arrive. La guitare assez discrète au début, qui est aussi assez typique du groupe. Et ensuite le solo, le magnifique solo que j'ai mis 8 ans à faire. Non, ça c'était trop cool, ça c'est tellement jouissif en vrai de faire des solos avec cette app parce qu'on a vraiment une sensation que c'est nous qui sommes en train de créer le son avec notre corps. Vu qu'on peut gérer en fait la profondeur du son, le vibrato avec la manière dont on bouge, ça nous donne vraiment une sensation de contrôle sur ce qu'on est en train de faire. Ce que j'ai adoré dans l'appli, c'est toutes les possibilités qu'on a en fait. Tu peux organiser ton studio absolument comme tu veux, tu peux mettre un instrument là, tu peux mettre un autre ici, le mettre plus gros, plus petit.
So that's I think, you know, when you really get sick of the mouse and keyboard, and you can get this virtual reality dock controller.
Sure.
It kind of reminds me of like some games that led up to the VR boom for music. Would like Fract OSC was a really interesting video game that included this studio mode that looked very similar to this, where you could kind of produce your own music within the game. So I think a lot of the VR apps have kind of taken their cue from video games that kind of were precursors to it.
I think someone's asking, Justin, you're asking about latency, I think. I'm wondering how timing your hits works with the software. Is every hit a button click, or do you have to be super accurate with your hand placement similar to playing a theremin?
Oh yeah, so it's not like a theremin in the sense that the pitches are quantized tonally. So like you could kind of see to bend you would just need to hold down, but I think more actually to answer the initial question, latency is less of an issue I found with the VR music making apps than it is with like software in general. So yeah, I think with something like this, I haven't played this because I don't have the link connection, but I would imagine it's much like it feels pretty like when you hit the button, you're going to hear the sound right away. And I think most of the apps that I've played with have not had many issues with latency.
And that's coming from a drummer, so that's good to know.
Yeah, right.
It's hard to imagine, right? I mean, the idea of hitting a button has implicit tactile feedback. Like, what does it mean to hit a button in the air?
Yeah.
And I guess the one thing they have, like haptics, is basically where haptics is basically vibration right now, right? So it's like if you're holding the Oculus controllers, you might feel vibration when you're actually pressing things, or you might not, depends on the developer. So I think Nintendo is probably the best company as far as haptics go, right? Like they've done a lot with the Switch in terms of haptic feedback. All right, so we have like maybe 10 minutes before questions or so. I'm gonna try out this. I'm gonna try out this sort of VR DJ demo. So I'm gonna try to stream my my Oculus Quest, and just to kind of give you a sense of what this looks like, you're going to kind of see me kind of fumbling around, but then you're also going to see the actual screen that I'm.
This is a fantastic use of CPU cycles. I'm all about this. This is what we should be doing with our 3.6 gigahertz machines.
Let's see.
How is it with glasses?
So it actually includes a spacer.
Uh-huh.
Space out like to get it, but and you can actually set the pupillary distance. Like the PD, when you buy glasses, you can set that on the lens themselves.
Oh wow!
It's actually pretty, they pretty considerate for that. And that's part of that has to do with the whole sickness thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to share this screen, see if this goes smoothly. I'm going to try to cast.
Mike, you look so music tech right now. We are all about this.
Right, so you can see, I have to look up here. Okay, let's try this. Can you see that now, or?
It's
Loading.
Okay, let me make that full screen.
We're in.
All right.
Tribe DJ, baby.
All right. So you're actually seeing what I'm seeing, which is the dashboard. Of course, the idea of escapism. This is the space that you're in when you enter the Oculus Quest.
Yeah, it's Vulcan, isn't it? Or where are we?
Yeah, right.
right.
Vacationing on Vulcan.
Yeah.
So this is our dashboard. This is our home. You can change your home. You can make it like a snowy mountaintop, and you can. So of course they're thinking about this idea of escapism. I'm going to open up this app. This is Tribe. It's Tribe XR. It was really interesting at first because the whole point of it is to emulate. You're seeing that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the whole point of this was to kind of emulate an actual CDJ setup that professional DJs use, and it literally emulates that to a T in front of you, and it's all fully functional. The other thing that they do well is that they offer lessons, like actual virtual lessons for people that have never DJed before. They'll actually give you like a virtual person in front of you that will teach you how to use it.
So what's like give us a range of like what's the hardware cost for the system they're emulating?
This would probably be like with the mixer and the two CDJs, like a $2,000 to $3,000 setup.
And the software is more like
the software. Oh, the software is like $30.
Okay, so 3,000 to 30. All right, we've got our expectation level set.
And this is the fun thing about this though is that it's been complicated by Twitch because Twitch has put limitations on streaming music. But initially they had a whole thing where you could actually live stream your sets to Twitch from the game.
Oh wow!
Nice.
And that was I thought was amazing. But then Twitch put these restrictions on what music you can stream and how you can stream it. The other thing I think this does well is, so what was I thinking about? Well, I'll just talk about how it works and then we can talk about the implications of it. You can change the scenery if you want, just like you can with you can kind of put yourself in a Burning Man desert kind of scene. So you see how it works is when you look at the actual controls, you see that there's actually a tooltip will pop up to show you. I think you can see that it says crossfader.
Yep, crossfader. Yeah.
A tooltip pops up to show you actually what the things do, and they're all fully functional. And then I can open up my kind of like my tracks up here to add them to my decks. This one's already loaded. I think I already loaded these ones, but loading stuff to your decks you can do from up here. You can also drag you can drag in your own tracks that you downloaded into the video game as well. And
so the perspective is kind of skeuomorphic, right? Like it's presuming I'm like a 5'11".
That's a good
user.
Yeah, actually,
like, could I be a 20-foot user who's leaning over? Or
oh, there you go.
Yeah, you can adjust the height of the setup. So I'm gonna let me just move back because I'm probably gonna hit the table or something. So I'm just gonna kind of play some stuff, and you can kind of see, I have the crossfader. So for those of you that don't know how DJ tools work, the crossfader will choose where I hear the sound from, so I can play it from. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I tried to turn the volume down. So I can play this track, and what I can do is I can, typical, kind of synchronize the next deck over here. So now they're running ambient jam. I'll usually set like a. I can jump this one and it's going to be synced up. I'm getting some latency. Maybe you're hearing that. If I was wrong about the latency issue. Are you hearing that latency?
A little bit. Yep.
Okay. The issue here is that I'm streaming, so the actions that I'm doing here are actually delayed from.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry about that.
Yeah.
Jump out of a loop in the track thing, load up a new track. Get it up there. You can see this is a good example of how it became very visual with visual tools. Often you'll have this kind of interface up here to show that the tracks are lined up. So this is one thing that a lot of like traditional DJs, like vinyl DJs, decry, is the idea that you became visual, that you didn't have to use your ears anymore. The fact that I can kind of talk over this as it happens. I'm getting a lot of latency or a lot of like kind of glitches. So maybe I'll just kind of pause it there, and we could talk, answer questions, or are you all good with that?
Yeah, sure.
So
Okay,
Patrick wants to know, how difficult is it to be accurate? You know, when you're really going for a specific parameter and you're trying to interact with something, like to our eyes, there's a lot of movement.
Yeah. You mean movement as in like the interface moving, or me?
Right, the table's moving, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. This is like infinitely easier when you're not streaming. Streaming adds the latency, but if I'm just playing by myself in the headset here, it's very easy to just kind of like flow with it. It feels much more immediate, but
It makes sense.
with streaming is usually where you run into the issues. So that's, to me, that's where they need to improve at this point. Right now, Oculus, you can only stream to a Chromecast. You could stream to Google Chrome, which is what I'm doing right now, or you can stream to Facebook Live, of course, because Facebook owns Oculus.
Of course.
Yeah. So that's not too bad. The issue with this app in Facebook Live is that the vocals get all distorted when you try to talk as you're playing, but the sound is great on Facebook Live. But yeah, I think they need to open it up to more streaming platforms and make it easier to kind of work with, you know, things like Streamlabs and all those types of tools.
Sure. Yeah.
Other things that you can kind of, you can see that you can actually create a DJ room and invite other people into it.
That's what I was gonna ask. If someone was in this room and they were looking at you, what would they be saying?
They'd
Your
be
avatar?
seeing the avatar, which is no, not there. Where's my avatar? There it is. Okay, so you can pick different skins for your DJ setup, right? You can also pick different. You can do 4 decks instead of 2. My avatar, I don't know if you'll see it because it's my Oculus Home avatar, but these, you can pick some of the different avatars. You can create your own avatar. They would actually see a person.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Then different environments, like just blackness, a desert lounge or tribe lounge. And then here's the lesson. You can actually download more lessons. I just haven't used them, but they'll show you how the whole breakdown. You can co-op DJ with a friend. You can have 2 people DJing at the same time. So to me, that's really the powerful feature of this, is the multiplayer aspect of it. Just having people kind of like you can invite people into this room and just listen to music together.
Sure.
Very powerful, I think.
Yeah, and so the kind of branding of Facebook Live to it kind of indicates why they would spend $1 billion to pick up Oculus, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you make a good point.
Yeah, there's something like 10 the past year, like 10 of the Oculus owned apps, virtual reality apps, made over like $10 million or something just in the past 6 months or something like that.
Wow.
So it's huge money for these developers, for these app developers in VR. Any questions about this? Maybe I'll take off the headset.
Yeah, we had a few. Let me scroll up a little bit.
There's one question that's a little more asking you to predict the future a bit. Like, do you think there'll be a permanent shift away from monopolies like Ticketmaster post-COVID?
Yeah.
Like, how is the monetary aspect of the live music business going to have to evolve?
Let me see if I can pull up. What time is it right now?
We got about 15 minutes.
Oh, cool. Okay, let me just pull something up. I'm going to go to the home screen, and there are some like venue, music venue. See if I can find the like concert experience type thing.
Do you think there's stuff like Eventbrite that's popped up, like other things that are kind of with the whole Ticketmaster monopoly model?
Yeah, they are. They already exist.
Yeah.
I don't know about their like financials in terms of how they're competing, but things like come on. I can search. Search for venues. I assume you're seeing this screen.
Yes. Yes.
We'll see if. Yeah, so Oculus TV, venues. Venues is a really interesting one because it's about like having actual concerts in VR. So they actually can schedule like concerts that you can attend that are real-time concerts. Some of the reviews tell you a bit about how it's working. Yeah, I'd imagine.
So that's kind of a point. I'm like, how is reading in VR? I mean, people are still accommodating reading online, right? Like students really want paper textbooks. Like there hasn't been this huge run towards the electronic ebooks that publishers had hoped. Is reading, I noticed they've like curved the screen and like they're trying to do some tricky things here.
Yeah. As an example, I think a common thing, like they have this thing called Big Screen, which is a VR app that you can watch movies on an actual big screen, but it feels like you're in like a drive-in movie theater and there's a big screen in front of you. But it's a multiplayer thing where you and friends can sit together and watch a movie. And that's kind of the model that they're at with reading too, I guess. Like YouTube VR is an example of that. It's basically, I have to sign in. YouTube VR kind of looks like this. If you're seeing like the big screen, yeah. This is like the most popular kind of like movie watching app. Is it's just going to look like a big movie theater screen, and you're in kind of an empty space, right? But 360 videos, like are I think YouTube 360 videos are a really great use of how VR can kind of be powerful.
I call it saving money by customizing car insurance with Liberty Mutual.
VR ads.
Quality. That's I'm gonna take the headset off now. This is what you're saying about the 10-minute limit of having. I think the YouTube VR is actually one of my favorite apps for VR, is just because it's about like listening to music or watching music in a 3D space.
So what added skills are content creators, are musicians going to need to navigate this space? I mean, like the clip we just saw, right? They're just playing live as if there were nobody else in the room but the people who are in the room. But what would the next phase of this look like when you start having performers understanding there's a separate audience?
I would say it's probably similar to Remember when opera started doing their like Met Live streams, and that totally changed the way opera singers perform, because they're used to performing with the audience way far away. So they overdid their makeup, they would over exaggerate their gestures, but then all of a sudden you're watching them like a foot away.
I mean, that translates to
awkward, right?
That translates to like people who act in theater versus film. Like
right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see the same transition there for performers.
Yeah.
With controllerism, for example, the whole thing about controllerism is that when they're performing live, they often overdo the gestures, right?
Exactly.
DJs who drop the bass and they lift their arm way up and then drop the bass. But with VR, I think like that just doesn't translate. So I think we're going to get maybe, hopefully, more nuance in performance, right?
Yeah, sure. Isaiah, you have two questions here. What does the continued combination of tech music mean in terms of jobs in the music industry? Yeah. And
yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at it like, I look at it as, this is just maybe because I just do this, and Jen, I'm sure you.
Yeah, I probably think the same of what you're thinking. So.
Yeah, which is that like you always want to just kind of keep your options open in terms of how you're branching out in the industry, and I just think the more you can have your foot in different areas of the entertainment industry, then that's kind of where I think we should be going. Is the future of music industry, the future of the games industry, is thinking more in terms of the future of the entertainment industry.
Sure.
We just opened like an entertainment industry studies track at Albright, which is like this sort of collaborative thing between business, games, arts, music. I think that's the way we want to be thinking about jobs now. Is how your work in music or in animation or in
siloed
games can kind of, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And let me see. Peter, you had a good question too. I'm sorry, I have to scroll here. Where is it? As cool as this is, how do you prevent the feeling of physical disconnection from the artist or the audience? Is it immersive? But it is immersive, but at the same time, they're still up to go from here with this approach to technology. Okay, that's a comment at least.
Yeah, right. So you're talking about like if you have a sort of like a virtual online space where like if I had people in the room with me, like how do you feel connected to them? Or
I guess. I mean, Peter, if you're still here, that's what it seemed like.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's pretty similar to the long history of like massive multiplayer online games.
Right.
Second Life,
I was about to say, this reminds me a lot of Second Life, like a lot of like what people would do in Second Life minus the VR component.
Sorry, something happened. Oh yeah, exactly. That's what I would say.
Clubs people would go to, or like they'd have like these really creative events, and this is just making it a more immersive feel to it or experience.
Yeah, and I'd say it's probably stronger like on the Quest, because we're separated from the computer. It has its own processor that the graphics aren't as good as like the Oculus Rift, which is connected to the PC. So you're sort of limited to these avatars that are kind of like clowny or goofy a little bit, and to me that does kind of limit the sort of feel of connection to other people in the space. So I think that's one area they have to go, is to how to create avatars that are meaningful to people and not just kind of like goofy animations or I don't know, something like that.
No, for sure.
But I don't think the nature of the interaction, I don't think is much different than a massive multiplayer online game like World of Warcraft or Second Life, these types of The Sims even, I don't know.
Sure, yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
So I think students at our level, the first couple of years are feeling overwhelmed already, right? Like there's a lot to learn. And so now this kind of feels like you turn to this angle and there's a whole nother wall of things that you have to learn. But do you think it sounds to me honestly like students probably have experience when you start recasting it into the video game experience and the massive online player experience. They have some experiences to draw on that they may not be considering.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think about it, like if you're thinking from a game design perspective, like we teach Unity as the engine at Albright, just because I think it's a much more accessible engine to get started with, but you're dealing with the same thing fundamentally as 3D simulations. If you play Skyrim,
yes,
and if you play Skyrim in VR, the only difference is that the perspective goes from a third person perspective to a
First.
VR kind of first-person perspective in a way.
That'd be fun to play it with VR, Skyrim.
They have it, but it's unfortunately there's a lot of like the graphics have been really downgraded.
Yeah. That would be so cool.
But if you think about it from a technical perspective of designing a game, it's not much different. Because you're in a 3D space, you're just changing the perspective from a third person following action to a first person. And in Unity, it's really all about you just basically have a like a perspective plugin that you just drop into Unity, and then there's your VR perspective.
Absolutely. Awesome.
And I would recommend, one thing I'd recommend for you all, I don't know if you have game design classes there, but you can apply for educational grants, which they're very easy to get, but you can get Unity on like Unity Pro on like a big lab of 20 plus computers.
Good to know.
Yeah, we do have some gaming programs. We've kind of had trouble getting people through them, and kind of a lot of times it's like it almost feels like a bait and switch, right? That's kind of hard programming.
Yeah,
like
for
3D
sure.
programming, 3D game 3D image development. People walk in, they think they're going to make a level of, Counter-Strike, and they're going to make a room and probably a wall of a room in a semester.
Yeah.
That's the balance between the computer science part of game design and then the digital arts side.
Yeah.
Like you have to know how to build 3D assets in Maya, but you also need to know how to program those assets to interact with virtual spaces.
Sure.
And yeah, that's certainly, at Albright, it's a computer science major versus the game and simulation development major. And balancing that. What I often tell students, especially from a pre-professional perspective, is to really focus on one thing and to collaborate with each other to build the bigger thing. So if you're a music person, you can compose the music. If you're a programming person, you can script the actions. If you're a digital media designer, you can build the Photoshop assets. That's really, to me, the only way you can actually build something substantial in a game design program.
Yeah, it's all about collaboration. So Mike, if we have, we know you're at Albright, and it sounds like there are amazing directions happening there. If any of our students were interested, do you guys have online open houses coming up, or anything that they could how could they interact with Albright and learn more about what you offer?
Yeah, honestly, I'd say the best thing would just be reach out to me, because I don't even know
that is good contact.
I would say, to be honest, I don't know that admissions knows half of the stuff we're doing. But yeah, we do have open houses, but I would say, reach out to me if you're interested in this stuff. And because obviously one thing that we had all talked about was collaborating, and then the pandemic hit. I remember it was like the week before you were all supposed to come to campus.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're right. Yeah, we were down. Yeah.
Middle of March.
Oh my gosh, it's been a year.
Yeah.
So we're still recouping from that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at the clock, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Mike, I can't tell you the number of wows in the chat.
Yes.
You've really opened a lot of people's minds to the possibilities here and to what the future might be bringing, and maybe even giving us a perspective of some things that were good from having been in quarantine for a year, right? We're not used to thinking that way, but there were some things that got pushed forward that would have taken a much longer time to develop. So thanks so much for what you invested here and for sharing with us. Do you have any final thoughts for our audience?
No, I thanks again for the invite. It's always fun to talk about this stuff and to talk about the sort of the philosophical side of it, and then to kind of bridge that with the more practical hands-on stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk with you because you have such a wealth of knowledge and a range of experience with this. We're really excited that we have a friendship here. We look forward to bringing you to Montco when we're back in the world and we can actually go to Montco ourselves.
Yeah,
which
for sure.
Which should be coming.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Mike. We really appreciate talking with you.
Thanks.
All right, thanks.